Good afternoon and welcome everyone to another installation of CRC Music in the Studio. My name is Maxwell Kiesner. I'm a professor of instrumental music here at Cosumnes River College. And I just want to welcome all of you who are joining us here for the first time. Those of us who are returning, welcome back. And thank you for continuing to support the program. This is something that we wanted to provide our community in the distance education mode of operation, because we know that there's so much missing, especially from the arts, that we wanted to make sure that we're providing as full and beneficial experience as we possibly can to our students and to the community that serves the CRC area. So welcome back. We've had a number of amazing guests already this year, and we have a really exciting lineup for the rest of the semester and into spring 2022. And I'm really excited to welcome you to the series today. We have a special guest artist today who is someone I admire greatly, who's a fellow trumpet player. For those of you who know me, I'm not only a director of bands, but I'm a trumpet player, and kind of bonded with this particular individual over the love and challenge of playing trumpet, I'm sure. And we'll get a chance to discuss his career in music and a number of other things today. Would you all please welcome Alphonso Horne to In the Studio.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Alphonso. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm on my second cup of coffee now, but I know that I need this less than you do, because when we talked earlier in the week, you had just flown in from Poland. Yes. And we're on to do recording sessions later that night and all kinds of stuff. So how are you?
I know, right? I flew in from Poland. I was doing a gig with Conrad Passacusi, pianist. This new awesome vocalist, Olivia Chindamo. She just graduated Juilliard. She sounds amazing. Dog Marcus on drums. I don't know if you know any of these people, but then Dylan Shamat, New York cats for the most part. Conrad does a lot of stuff in San Francisco, which I'll mention later. The Jazz at Ballroom series, which is I'm coming out to San Francisco next week, next Wednesday through Friday. So busy schedule, craziness. Yeah. So I guess I can talk a little bit about that. Like, I landed at 6:30, had a recording session right after. I just drove straight to the recording session. That went till midnight. Then I had another recording session the following morning, and rehearsals and gigs. And so I actually have a gig right after this. So it's, kind of busy already again. So.
I love it. It's funny though, because like we think of musicians as often like these people who sit in a room and ponder their own creativity and the meaning of life, and music just spills out of them one night at a concert.
That'd be wonderful.
Wouldn't it be? But for me, this whole series is about kind of demystifying like what it means to be a musician, and to try to provide a pathway forward for our students, to try to provide them some practical guidance. And it seems like you have such a full schedule, and it just goes to the point that working musicians is really where this happens. If you're going to play for a living, it is truly work, and it's something that you have to dedicate serious time to. It's not that romantic ideal of awe and inspiration that manifests itself at a in a concerto or a beautiful concert at some point. It's work, man, and you gotta dig. Yeah. So before we get into all that, why don't we just give the audience a little taste of what you do? I believe we have a clip of you playing at Louis Armstrong's house, and you kind of have a special connection to Louis Armstrong and his music, which is a great conversation point. But I think we'll show this to the folks first, and then we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Okay, great.
All right.
Woo! Hey everybody, my name is Alphonso Horne, and we're here to give you an incredible show celebrating the life and legacy of trumpet legend Louis Armstrong. Hey, Louis was one of the world's greatest artists of all time. He changed the world with his joyful spirit, created new ways of playing and singing, brought people together, and was a force of good. Now, I've asked some of my friends to help tell his story and play some of his music. On the drums, give it up for Goldbas. Oh. On the the melodica and piano. Give it up for Matisse Picard. On the trombone, give it up for Mario Bilston. Give it up for Russell Hall on the bass. On the clarinet, give it up for Dennis Lichtman. Oh! And on the vocals, give it up for Alida Moses. Oh, when the saints go marching in, go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in, go marching in. Oh, how I long to be in that number when the saints go marching in. I can't believe we're about to go into the home of my hero, Louis Armstrong. Should I ring the doorbell?
Yeah.
Come on. Okay. Hey, there he is. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Man, welcome. How's everybody?
Good.
Great. It's great seeing you all. So, welcome to 107th Street.
107th Street in Queens, right?
In Queens, that's right. In Queens, yeah. I mean, that could be the whole talk, as we, that this is a program that the Louis Armstrong House Museum does called Pops is Tops. And usually it's done in Louis's backyard for schools around the area, in the Queens area. And because of the pandemic, we weren't able to play live for the students this past year and the year before, 2019. And so 2020, 2020. And we did like a crazy version of it in 2020 where we just used our iPhones, and it was like really crazy and weird. But it was fun. It was like a chance for us to figure out how to do it. And we managed to get a whole hour presentation of the show with just our iPhones in 2020, and that was, it was actually that recording where I was recording at my house, and it was like the last take of that when I tripped and fell and fractured my femur. Yeah. And then the whole drama of like being taken to the ER, and they found out that it was a benign tumor and removed it, replaced it with bone cement, the plate and screws. And so I'm still deep in recovery with that. But then, we had the anniversary of that in 2021 of the Pops is Tops video. And we decided to like really put some energy into it to get some really great videographers, a great film crew, a great band, and really put together a really great film for not just the kids, but also just, we're entering it into like film competitions for like children's shows, around the nation. And I think it like is, in the semifinalist round, or at least finalist round. So, I'll stop talking for now. So I'll let you take over.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've really had a lot going on personally and professionally the last year. The pandemic has presented some unique challenges to everybody. And that's always an interesting point of conversation, like those who have kind of like come out of this, not that we're out of it, but like who have emerged through this and the many difficulties that the last year had presented, maybe had hardened them in a certain way, or kind of verified that the way that they're doing business is absolutely the right way. You're communicating the right way, you're organizing yourself in the right way. Or it kind of said, hey, maybe I need to change some things because the gigs are drying up and I still need to pay rent and those kinds of things, But more on that later. Let's get back to the Louis Armstrong bit, because it seems to be that this is a very important musician in your life, not just from like a playing standpoint, but from a personal standpoint as well. You kind of talked about him as being a joyful personality and that kind of thing. What do you think it is about Louis Armstrong that influenced you so much initially, and that continues to inspire people, especially young people today?
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, then I can go into, the relationship with the Louis Armstrong House Museum as well. So like my personal connection to Louis Armstrong is like, he's the master of the trumpet, just period. Outside of style, outside of, helping to create, jazz music to begin with, but just the trumpet itself, and as you know, the difficulties of that instrument, and to just every day be so consistent in his playing and so consistent in his attitude and his spirit as well. But with just the trumpet itself, it's just amazing what he can do with that instrument. And and then musically, that it's always melodic, it's always lyrical, it's always the feeling. And one thing I don't, like he really loved listening to opera music, and everyone talks about that. It's like, oh, he practiced the arias and like listened to opera music, but to me, he plays like an opera singer. Like his vibrato and the way his vibrato is being played, and then like he has this big boisterous sound like an opera singer, that like reaches across the stage, reaches across the audience. And for the people that don't know, when he was recording with his mentor King Oliver, they would have to put him in the back of the room because his sound was so big. And so I just love that about his playing and his personality, that is so big, is so infectious, is so joyous and so brilliant. And that's one of the things that I look for in a musician, that like, there's plenty of musicians that are super virtuosic that can play anything and everything, but their personalities, like can be dark, or like they can be mean spirited. But Louis Armstrong always, no matter what he was going through, I'm sure he was going through a lot, between the times, racially, just as a musician, just everything, what he was going through. But he decided to put that on the side and to show a joyous spirit and a joyous personality. And that's the one main thing that I really try to take away from Louis Armstrong, is that, no matter what I'm going through, can I present joy to people? Can I uplift the audience? That's our job, that music is medicinal, that we're using music as medicinal power to uplift people. And Louis Armstrong is a prime example of that. And then, and then a lot of people, look at music as like, either you're super serious, you're in a tuxedo and a bow tie behind a music stand, virtuosing, and everyone has to be quiet to listen to you, or like, you're selling yourself out and like you're entertaining, you're dancing, you're singing. And Louis Armstrong was the perfect example of both. He was the highest entertainer and the highest artist, that both lived in one person. There doesn't have to be a choice. That really, it should be both. That you should be, entertaining the audience, like uplifting the audience, and playing amazing art music. That's always kind of my motto, our mantra, is that like, if the person in the back of the room that has no idea what instrument I'm playing, like what music I'm playing, how can I make that person feel better? How can I get them, gravitated to the music? So yeah, those are some things that I love about Louis Armstrong. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. There's a lot there to talk about, because I think, and especially for the jazz students who are listening, those in the jazz history course and those who are enrolled in the ensemble as well, sometimes jazz musicians get knocked for being maybe too serious, and like there's all these, pop culture kind of references that say, jazz tends to be, more than it really needs to. It's talking a lot but not saying much, and those kinds of things. I think there's a famous line from the Commitments movie about that, which I won't repeat here, but it's like it doesn't deliver a narrative like a sung melody would. Of course, we can all hang on to lyrics. So how do you create that personal connection when you're not using words? And Louis Armstrong's a really good person, an example of a person who could do that across cultures globally. Connect with people with the beauty of his sound and the joyful spirit that he imbues in his playing. And one question I had for you was, do you have an artistic viewpoint or a directive, like something that kind of guides you forward? Because in the world, you can choose to do so many projects. You're going to get hired and called for all these gigs and things. Like, what do you say no to? What do you say yes to? And it seems like you've answered that question. Like, it's all about joy. I don't know if that's a reduction.
Well, Well, no, well, it's well, and then I have to be careful about that. That like, oh, that it's okay to show all ranges of emotion. And to me, it's kind of the it's easy because as musicians, most of our time is spent in the practice room in the beginning. Most of our time is spent in the practice room, so we can get into our own world, our own world of musicians, and only play for each other and not be mindful of the audience and bring them into the experience. And so for me, it is about sharing the feeling. Like you were saying that, oh, if you don't have lyrics, how are you to express yourself? You express yourself through feeling. That the music should be about the feeling more than it is about the virtuosicness about, oh, this is what I played over these changes, or I'm playing outside the changes now, I'm playing all this like quote unquote hip stuff. To me, it's about like it's the essence of the blues, that like that you're playing this feeling, and that is cathartic in itself. So you can be angry and you can express that angerness on stage, that anger mood on stage, mood on stage. But through you sharing your feelings, it serves as a catharsis that you're releasing that, and you're still uplifting the audience. For me, and it was really a pop gig that did this, because like right after I graduated, I started saying yes to anything and everything. I got extremely lucky, and Wynton recommended me to play in a Broadway show that he was producing called After Midnight. So I was doing that eight shows a week on top of just gigging, and I was just saying yes to anything and everything. But it kind of put me into like a mode of just clocking in, clocking out. And it wasn't until I did this soul pop gig with Alan Stone where we were singing, we were dancing, we were playing. And before, he's the son of a pastor, and he was a worship leader before he became like an R&B soul artist. Um, he would gather us around. We would like have prayer before we went on stage, and he would always make a point of saying that it's not about playing the music extremely perfectly every time. It's about uplifting the audience and making them feel better. And he would go into the audience and he would hug them, and in the middle of the show and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, I'm like, oh wow, this is what music is supposed to be about. Because oftentimes you get locked into, at least in the jazz world, you get locked into gigs where it's background, or you're clocking in, or like no one's really listening, and like you're in that kind of phase of it. And I remember coming back to New York, and I was auditioning to be a director of the New York Youth Symphony Orchestra, jazz orchestra. And then and I saw the kids, and they were just like under their stands, just like another rehearsal, another like, I don't know who you are, director. Okay, fine, whatever. Yeah. And I was just like, I can't come back to this. I cannot come back to this world. Like, no. If we're gonna do this, we're going to be uplifting people. We're going to be sharing our feelings on stage. We're going to be true. We're going to be truly emoting through the music, as opposed to just clocking in and clocking out. So for me, that was the shift, that like that I no longer wanted to play music just for musicians or just for myself. That I wanted to play music for real people.
That's an amazing revelation, I think, too, because you don't learn that in music school. You don't get taught music as a customer service. You know what I mean? Like, it's
right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people go and they become like connoisseurs. They become what do you call it? Sommeliers. These kinds of things. And it's about the wine. It's about the thing that you're serving, but ultimately it's about the service at the end of the day. But with music, it's like, we talk about communicating, but we don't think of music as a customer service necessarily. Mm-hmm. And that can be really powerful for some people, because it takes the pressure off of you. It's not all in your head anymore. It's about
I mean, even Marcus Roberts, who I consider a very serious musician. When I was studying with him at Florida State, he would always make a point. He's like, when you go to perform, people are paying tickets. They could be watching Netflix, you know, they could be like sitting home watching TV, but they decided to like pay X amount to like sit in their seats and watch you. So like, don't ever clock it in, you know. He would never let us clock it in, you know. We would always have to be playing music at the highest level with him. Yeah,
of course. Well, let's hear something. There's this piece called Portrait of Louis Armstrong, which is a famous piece written by Duke Ellington. Was that part of the New Orleans suite? Do you recall?
Yes, that is a part of the New Orleans suite.
Part of the New Orleans suite dedicated to other musicians and, you know, how important New Orleans is to the history of the music and culturally in the United States. And so you're playing this piece, a very famous trumpet feature, with the University of Wisconsin-Madison band, and it's like what, 300 people on stage or something. It's huge, it's massive. I don't know even how you did that from a practical standpoint. It must have just been, you know,
a clip-on mic, but it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So let's give the folks a taste of Portrait of Louis Armstrong.
Okay.
Man, that sounded like a lot of fun. I mean, what a massive group to play with. I mean, so they always do these big spectaculars, right? And it's about showmanship, and it's about, you know, engaging the community and that kind of thing. Did you have input on that tune? Did they ask you what you wanted to play?
Oh yeah. He asked me what I wanted to play and stuff, and so You know, Mike also was a huge Louis Armstrong fan, and I think at that time he was 85, and even you know, and I was just one of many, many, many acts. There was acrobats, there was like all types of like spark, you know, spectacles and all that kind of stuff, and including him, he was being pulled up, you know, into like the top of the stadium, into the roof, and taking flips at the age of 85. I'm like, I won't even do that now. So, um, you know, so let's see. So, but it was actually my first time playing with a marching band. You know, I went to Florida State, so you have the Chiefs, you know, the Seminoles, and you know, I never got into that culture because I was someone at that time who took myself so seriously. I was like, no, 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 I'm never gonna play in a marching band. That'll make my sound, you know, bright and nasty. I want this dark flugelhorn, Freddie Hubbard, Louis, not Louis. I mean, at the time, not that. It was like Wynton. I wanted to sound more like Wynton and Freddie Hubbard, you know. And it really, the shift for me, another shift that happened that made me less of like super serious was actually playing with Disney All American College Band in California in Anaheim. And I originally really didn't want to do it, but Ron McCurdy kind of like bullied me into it. It was like, yo, you need to do this. We need you to do it. And I was like, okay, fine. And so I did it. And at first I'm like, oh, this is so corny, so cheesy, whatever. Disney, blah, blah, blah. It's Disney. Come on. And then, you know, over time, I was like, oh, wait, actually, you can have fun playing music. Oh, wait a second. Okay, it doesn't have to be serious all the time. And then it was really, the thing that really shifted it was, you know, there were people that would come to we had 5 shows a day, 5 days a week, and people would come to every show. And if they couldn't make it, they would Facebook message us and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I got stuck in traffic, all that stuff. But there was, you know, there were families, and like there was this a disabled kid who couldn't move from the waist down. He was in a wheelchair, but whenever he saw us, he would get up on his feet and wave his hands. And so at the end, she came to us and, you know, cried, just being like, this is the only time he moves is when, you know, he sees you guys, and I want to thank you so much, you know, for, you know, what you do and in your service. And that was when I was like, okay, like I'm not above that. Like that's really what music is supposed to be about, you know, uplifting people, and it's not just about, you know, someone checking me out and my artistic, you know, whatever virtuosicness or whatever. It's about reaching people. So that was
a great point.
That was a great shift for me. So I'm like, oh, I love marching bands. I want to play with marching bands all the time. And you, I think you mentioned, you didn't ask this, but you were going to, so I'll answer it now. Of like, if there's something I could take back, I wish I learned that lesson sooner. And then also, you know, there are things that I could have learned from the marching band about, having a big sound, having range, having endurance as far as the instrument itself. And so in a lot of ways, you know, I took myself too seriously. I would never play lead. I would never play, you know, in a marching band that size, because I didn't want my sound to get too bright and you know. And I wish I had a little bit of that as a commercial, not as a freelance musician. It's like, like, I mean, there was a time Jazz at Lincoln Center, Ryan Kaiser couldn't do the gig, and they called me to sub, and I was like, oh my God, I can't. I hope they're not expecting me to play Ryan Kaiser's part, you know. And thank God when I got there, like Kenny Rampton and Print Up moved up, and I just played Print Up's part. But like, you know, had I done more, you know, lead playing and more, you know, just like intense brass playing like that, I would have been a little more prepared. I don't, you know, obviously not many people in the world are prepared for that gig, but you know, you just putting yourself in that mindset of like wanting to be prepared for anything you get called for.
Yeah, of course. And forgive my crying toddler in the background, but there's a clip.
You can bring him.
So there's a clip of you playing a piece on a piccolo trumpet, which is a really famous piccolo excerpt. So I'd like to show that now, just to show people a little bit about what your training was like, because people see you as a jazz musician now, but like, you know, we clearly balance the two disciplines of classical and jazz. So let's go to the Alphonso Horne and Sarah Folsom masterclass. Oh,
Yeah.
Lord have mercy, man. Wow. Yeah, that is such a beautiful and very difficult thing to do.
Well, I was like, it brings it full circle because I was talking about Louis Armstrong listening to opera, and now we just listen to opera.
100%. There's a through line, right? There's a thread
Yeah,
to all
that's so
things.
funny. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it's interesting though, because again, there's this misperception of jazz musicians that we jazzers can't, exhibit some kind of technical fluency, or we don't have like the discipline to play stuff that is within the Western canon, or even written down for that matter. I think there's a lot of this mystery about jazz musicians. They think they just make things up. So I don't know if you want to address that, but there is a question in the chat I'll get to in a second.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. Thank you for bringing that up because, yeah, I agree. I agree with exactly what you just said, that a lot of people don't see jazz as serious as classical music. And, Wynton said this in the masterclass one time that, jazz is an extension of classical music, that it's kind of an evolution of classical music because we are spontaneously composing in the moment. That classical musicians, they're amazing at what they do, but it's written music and you practice the music until you get it perfect, and you perform it, versus a jazz musician, we're improvising in the moment, and so I think we're starting to demystify that because actually the day of the quarantine in New York City, I was playing in Carnegie Hall with the American Symphony Orchestra alongside, as a sideman with Marcus Roberts, and all of the classical musicians are looking at us like, wow, that's amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then we're looking at them, oh, that's amazing, you can play these parts, so like it, in the real world, like there's a mutual respect for what each other do. That, at least now, classical musicians do not look down on jazz musicians at all. It's like, whoa, you can kind of do what we're doing, but also improvise on that, which is amazing. And at that time, me as like my kind of classical background, I went to Florida State for classical and jazz, so that was a master class with Phil Smith. And for me, so it's, like, especially even at Juilliard, you're kind of forced to choose, like either you're going to play jazz or you're going to play classical. They really don't support you kind of trying to do it all, except the specific professor, Mark Gould, but he's kind of an anomaly in itself. Like he's kind of outside, he's like the guru outside of Juilliard. But even a school like Juilliard doesn't support like you trying to do both. It's like, okay, if you need to really dig in, it's going to be intense, in either direction that you choose. Whereas Florida State, I'm glad I went to Florida State for that reason, because I was allowed to kind of dive into whatever I wanted to, not just as a musician, but also as a person, because you have to take general ed courses and all that kind of stuff, and I could choose what ed courses I could take, but it just made me a more rounded person,
Absolutely.
so that I could express myself in the music. But for me, my guiding light was Wynton, as far as like someone who could play classical but also play jazz at the extreme highest level, and my goal was always to play in an orchestra during the day and play jazz gigs at night. But after my undergrad, I was just realizing, obviously it's super competitive. Like in that world, you can't miss a note. Because you're practicing that part, like, you have to play it perfectly. Can't miss one note. If you miss one note, you don't even make it to the semifinalist round. You're out. If you crack one note. And that would drive me crazy. And also just the lack of expression that, like, I mean, obviously within the music you can be expressive, but in jazz music, obviously there's more freedom of expression because you're actually improvising. You can play it in your same way. And so, like, actually my classical professor, Christopher Moore, put it really simply for me that, like, he was saying, like, if you put 8 classical trumpet players or of any instrument next to each other, they're going to sound pretty similar. If you put like 8 jazz trumpet players next to each other, they're going to sound completely different. So one's going to have like a Miles Davis sound, one's going to sound like Dizzy, one's going to sound like Lewis, all of this different stuff. So I kind of like that like every person that you hear who's a jazz musician has their own voice and has a different way of saying something. If they were to play that piece, a jazz musician is like, oh, you can play it in any way you want to, we would hear 8 different responses, So I kind of found more freedom of expression in the jazz world. Which is why I kind of gravitated towards jazz.
That kind of addresses the question, which is why you chose music as a career. And I guess to kind of build off of that, maybe you could start by saying how, like, before your time at Florida State and then Juilliard, what were you doing in like the high school and middle school? Like who got you your first trumpet, or like, how'd you start? And then has there ever been like a really, really hard obstacle that you've had to face in your career, or has it been pretty much like kind of the way forward for you without resistance? You know what I mean?
I mean, you might have to come back to, that was like 3 different questions. To come back, especially that last one. But I'll talk about like how I got into music in general. So my dad is a musician. I come from a family of musicians. My dad and my grandmother are pianists. So that side of the family, I think everyone can like dabble on the piano a little bit. And my dad is the only one on that side of the family that really like made it his career, because it was just fun for him. And like at that time, in that kind of scene, the musicians got all the ladies. So like he's like an old school rhythm and blues player. So like he would sing and play and all that kind of stuff. And so, but he did play trumpet in high school. So there was a trumpet sitting around. And I always went to art schools. Even from elementary school, I went to art school. And I actually really wanted to go into musical theater and dance and stuff like that. I was really gravitating towards that. But my dad was really influential to me musically. and really taught me how to play the trumpet, and I would play gigs with him. And from there, I started to like gravitate more towards music in middle school. And we had a really great, probably one of the best in the country, like middle school, like, programs in North Florida. And I, had a really great fundamental teacher that really taught me trumpet fundamentals. We spent a year just working on fundamentals before we worked on any kind of music. We spent a whole year learning long tones and slurs and scales and articulations, because his philosophy was that if you had a great control over the instrument, then you can play any style you want to. But it's going to be really hard the other way. If you don't know how to play the instrument, it's going to be really hard, especially with trumpet, So he really enforced that upon his students, that we really needed to have a great foundation in the trumpet, and how to play the trumpet. And like all the trumpet players that I look up to, and I think, that I guess there's a mutual respect. I always wonder, like, why does Wynton, like, there's plenty of like amazing virtuosic trumpet players. I don't know why he likes me or whoever, or Terrell, or Sean. And I would say the thorough line is that they all studied classical and have a foundation in trumpet playing. They all studied classical music.
Right.
So I guess they can hear that in my playing as well. But anyway, so sorry, so I'm trying to get back to your question. So then I went to college, and like, yeah, and from then on, of course, like I wanted it to be my professional career, to be a musician. But I was also interested in marketing, so I got a minor in business. I do not use that in any kind of way now, but yeah, I got a minor in that, and then I like worked for a Cutco knife company where I went door to door, selling knives, and then I worked. We have a family friend who works for a dental service, emergency dental service in Savannah, and I did that during college, during the summers, and doing both of those gigs. I was just like, this is nice, because I did fairly well. Like they wanted me to be one of the managers at Cutco, and like I will say that if you are a good musician, if you put that energy towards anything else, because it takes a lot of discipline to be a good musician, because it takes so much alone practice time, that if you put that kind of discipline towards any other area, you would be really great at it.
100%.
I will say that. So that was something that I did realize, that both of those things, like, they really liked me and wanted me to go up the ladder with, but it was just not feeding my soul. And then from then on, after that, that was a shift for me too, that I was like, okay, whatever I do has to involve music, whether it's teaching, administrative, whatever it is. Like I need to like play music and be a part of the arts,
Yeah.
So that shift happened, and then I know you asked another question.
Well, maybe we can leave the most difficult obstacle you've ever.
The most
maybe
difficult. I mean, honestly, now it's interesting. I don't, and I know this might sound a little weird, but the obstacle for me is the work-life balance that, and so I'm still struggling through that, obviously, of. As a musician, when I graduated, I just said yes to everything. And I'm still kind of in that mode of like, if I'm free, if I have any free time, then it's like, okay, then I have a gig. And if I have like Poland is a great example, because we only had one concert in Poland, but the band leader was like, why won't we just hang out in Europe? It's been over a year since, I've been in Europe, why not just hang out? But those 2 days off were cringing. I was just like, wait, I
don't know what to do with yourself now.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, am I failing? Like, I have 2 days off, Yeah. So that's the thing I kind of struggle with. Is like, it's okay to take time off. It's okay to take a vacation. Like,
say it again.
Well, because because it's not a 9-to-5 job. There's a week where you're playing 3 gigs a day or whatever, and then there's a week where you might have 1 or 2 gigs, or no gigs or whatever. And so it's always this fluctuation that puts you in that habit of always saying yes. But if you don't schedule in self-care time, then you become jaded. You're exhausted and you're running on fumes. And that's one thing that I think all of us learned during the pandemic was like, at least for me, I was like, oh my God, like I was going so hard. Like I don't like it now things are opening and I'm getting back into the mode of that. I'm like, I don't ever want to go back to that. That was too much, you know? Like I was gaining weight. I was getting sick all the time, you know, and it's just like, it wasn't healthy, you know? Yeah. And to like learn how to build in self-care time. And I really think the injury was for me the biggest lesson in that like I really have to integrate it. Like I literally can't physically like run around like I used to. Or like I got an offer to teach at Michigan State because ATN left. And it was a big challenge for me. That was a really challenge, because it's like everyone wants a gig like that. And like it was really hard for me to say no, but like, you know, the year before the pandemic, I was doing that. I was covering for ATN and going on the road and touring. So I wasn't in one place for more than 2 or 3 days. It would be like 3 days in Michigan, then fly out 6 in the morning to go whatever tour, or come back to New York to do whatever gigs. And I was just exhausted and physically just super sick all the time, always tired. And now with the leg injury, there's no way I could physically do that again. But egoically, I was just like, wait, why would I say no to this? Like, I got to do this. I got to do it. So it was a couple of days of a serious struggle of like, no, like I physically cannot do this. And that's okay. Like, I need to find the things that align with me and my body and my health. And I will say that like in your 20s, you're like, yeah, you can take it. You can take the beating. But like once you hit your 30s, like which I think at any age, the mind, the spirit, and the body should come before anything, you know? That like your overall wellness is the most important thing in life. And your creativity, your music, and your career should be a reflection of that, you know? So, you know, and obviously what we're talking about is a very privileged existence to begin with. To like be surviving as an artist, like, is a miracle in itself, you know? Yeah. So not to like, you know, put that down. I'm super grateful for every opportunity that comes to me, but it's about finding the opportunities that align with my overall wellness and my overall self-care. So that's my biggest obstacle, is my work-life balance, you know?
That's really interesting you say that, because I was thinking about you, I don't know, a few months ago, I was watching Stephen Colbert or something, and then I was watching the band, you know, and of course everyone knows Jean-Baptiste and the group he runs there and everything. And I saw you were playing trumpet with that group, but I took a screenshot and I was about to text it to you. And I said, oh, I must be pissing. I don't want to bother with that.
You should have texted. Yeah.
I said, oh, Fonz, man, he is really doing so many really fun and interesting things. And then also in the past few years, you were featured in a movie called Bolden, or it was about Buddy Bolden, famous kind of like progenitor of Louis Armstrong and the whole like lineage of trumpet kings. And maybe we can bring up that clip now. This is the trailer to Bolden, and you'll see Alphonso in front of the stage, kind of playing this character that challenges Buddy Bolden in a musical duel. So let's check that out. This is the trailer to Bolden.
Teach him a lesson, buddy.
So that's really interesting. That must have been really fun, of course, because you said you had an interest in musical theater, and not only did you have a feature in this film, but you have been on Broadway. You've been playing on Broadway for a while, and you actually have your own musical production now, right? Musical theater production. So maybe we could show a clip of that as well. You have a piece. Do you want to prepare it, Mother Kofi? This piece.
Oh yeah. Okay. So so Mother Kofi is a piece that I'm writing about a Ghanaian princess who came to America in the 1920s, worked with Marcus Garvey in the United Negro Improvement Association. She left that organization for various reasons and started her own organization, and she considered herself a prophetess. Her followers called her Mother Kofi, and she called her followers her children. And she built churches and communities in the South, in Florida and Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, even New York. I just recently got in touch with a branch in New York, and this was very controversial at the time as a African woman to be doing this. And there were fellow politicians and pastors, preachers that conspired against her, who tried to get her deported on false claims, tried to get her arrested, all of these different things. And so she, as a prophetess, she foresaw her assassination. She told her followers that she would be assassinated, and shortly afterwards that there would be a man short in stature, high in temper, from Africa to continue her work. And so she was assassinated March 8th, 1928, in Miami, Florida, which is the week of Ghanaian Independence Day, which is Women's Day. International Women's Day is on March 8th, and Women's History Month is the month of March. And so this was the day that she passed away, and she was buried in a mausoleum in my hometown, Jacksonville, Florida. Shortly after she passed away, my grandfather, that side of the family is from Cape Town, South Africa, and they helped founded, like my great-grandfather founded the African National Congress. And so my grandfather came to New York, worked in the African Native Union, and that's where her followers found him and said that he would be the one to continue her work. And so he accepted the calling, bought 11 acres of land in Jacksonville, Florida, built a church and community in which I grew up in. And I decided to write a show about it. I mean, originally it was a suite of music, but then I was like, oh, this wants to be bigger. And originally I was like thinking Broadway direction, like, yeah, this wants to be the next Faylar, Once on This Island. And wanted to like pitch it to Broadway and do that whole thing, which I mean, I guess it still could if it wants to go in that direction. But I think as far as where we are now, especially where we are now, I was already in this mindset before the pandemic, but especially after the pandemic, I really think it serves better as a ceremony. I like to call it an immersive theatrical ceremony, where we not only celebrate her life, but we celebrate the lives of people that are no longer with us that have contributed to our current lives and our current path forward. That we take that time in the beginning of the show, we call upon their names and we invite their entities into the room, because they're still a part of us. They're still a part of our consciousness, of our spirit. And so we celebrate them as we celebrate Mother Kofi and her legacy.
Wow, thank you for that. Let's check out the trailer.
Join us this Mother's Day to celebrate Mother Kofi, the tale of the African princess. Lord Dr. Kofi, known to her followers as Mother Kofi, was a Ghanaian princess sent on a mission to America to deliver a message of invitation, union, and self-help. We look forward to seeing you this Mother's Day, May 13th at 6 p.m. in Harlem at the Black National Theater. Bring your mama, bring your grandmama, bring your auntie, your cousin, your wife, your husband, your kids. We celebrate with everybody on Mother's Day.
I love it. I love
So
it.
silly.
So much joy. Yeah, so much joy.
Well, Antidote. Sorry, that's Sean Jones' wife, by the way, who plays the role of Mother Coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was like, he showed up to a dress rehearsal. I'm like, what are you doing here? This was before they got married. They were dating at the time. He's like,
Right.
oh, I'm like, oh my God, Sean Jones. But then, and he loved it and was super supportive. He still is super supportive. So, yeah, it was good.
Well, it's so interesting. You have such a diverse career in music, and we're here at the end of the session. But, I mean, you must have had to navigate so many different things to get all these opportunities, right? I mean, getting a SAG card, I'm sure, to actually act and have a part in a movie, like navigating all those.
No, I didn't get a SAG card. Sorry.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay.
Well, I will say this. I will say this, that like me as a musician helped to open the doors in theater, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That like if I started as an actor and tried to build, that road is a lot longer in the sense of like, I mean, it's just like how Mariah Carey or Beyonce can act in movies and all this kind of stuff. That like it's really their stardom as like musicians or performers that they open the doors. Yeah. So I have to admit that like as a musician, as a trumpet player, it opened the doors into theater to not only compose for things but to also act and do whatever else, So
well, it sounds like you're just kind of starting your journey.
I know. It's like I'll be like 50 years old. It's like rising star.
No, what I mean is I know that there's going to be a lot of amazing work coming out of your home and from your trumpet and from your pen, musically speaking, and we really look forward to hearing everything. So if you all out there want to check out Alphonso Horne in person, he's playing next week in San Francisco. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
I know, right? I'm like, where am I playing? It's through this organization called the Jazz at Ballroom series. And the public events are on the 30th and on the 1st. The 30th is at St. Joseph's Art Society. And then the 1st is like in the Hillsborough neighborhood. I don't have the exact name of the place. I think it's like just their like headquarters. But I think if you look up the Jazz at Ballroom series, I'll send you the information too.
Yeah, we'll shoot it out to everybody.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this short hour. I'm sure we could have talked for another one, and
I know, right?
Many more after that. Best wishes to you, and
thank you. You too.
Really looking forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we gotta hang out. Thank you, man.
All right, y'all. Join us next week
for
CRC Music in the Studio. Take care, everyone.
You too. Take care.
Bye.